Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, we are wrapping up our series exploring the habits, mindsets, methods, and routines of the best deer hunters in the world. And today, our final guest is Andy May.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their Camo for Conservation initiative and their brand new, totally reinvented line of whitetail gear that just launched last week. I'll give you a little bit more details on that if you didn't hear last week's episode. But before that, I do want to kind of cue up today's episode because, as I mentioned at the top, we are wrapping up our Mindsets of the Whitetail Masters series. This is episode 6 of that mini series, I believe. And I hope you found it as interesting and valuable as I have. The goal with all this was to get a different look, to get a different perspective on these best of the best deer hunters. Because here's one of the things I've noticed. One of the things I've noticed over the last 10 plus years doing this podcast is that it's very easy to fall into a rut when it comes to deer hunting and just kind of doing the same old thing. You find what's comfortable and you fall into that groove and you stick with it. And that's true not only in deer hunting, but also in creating content about deer hunting, trying to teach people about deer hunting. There's a lot of folks doing the same old thing over and over and over and over again. And sometimes it's hard to avoid that for myself too. So I'm constantly trying to find different ways to approach this topic, different ways we can learn. And when it comes to some of these guests, there are a lot of great deer hunters out there, but everybody is talking to them, right? There's 1,000 different podcasts and TV shows and Instagram accounts, and everyone's talking to the same people, getting the same information told and regurgitated over and over and over. So one of my main goals, what I tasked myself as the host of this show and trying to be someone creating something valuable and respectful of your time, is finding a new lens to look at this stuff with. And that's what I've tried to do with this series, to talk to these hunters that we've all heard from before, but to dig into a different side of their success than other people have. So we've tried to peel back the onion. We've tried to get behind the scenes inside their minds to understand what their goals are, why they think about success in a certain way, how they view failure, how they think about hard work and mental toughness and discipline and decision making, and how they execute on those things, how they actually take action, how that manifests in their hunting lives. And I think we've achieved a lot of what I was hoping to. I think there's a lot more I'd still like to get out of this kind of conversation, and maybe we'll revisit this series in the future with other people. But I guess a few things stand out for me that I want to, leave us with here before we, kind of go into our final chat with Andy May, who I guess I should mention is our guest today. He probably goes without need for introduction. He's been on this show many times in the past. He's been with us for almost a decade now. He's, of course, one of the very best deer hunters out there, someone I look up to and respect and admire, both as a deer hunter and as a friend. He's just a great guy all the way around. And he seemed like a perfect person to wrap this show or this series up with, because he brings an everyman perspective. He doesn't do this kind of thing full time. He has a regular full-time job. He has a family. He has other obligations, and still he manages to have incredible hunting success. So how does he do that? How does he bucket hunting within his life? How does he compartmentalize the different parts of his life in such a way that he can give the necessary energy to hunting, but also the necessary focus and energy to his family and to his regular job and all these different things? We cover all that. This is absolutely one of our best chats that we've had in the whole series. So I'm glad that we end with this, because we're ending on a high note. But with that said, and I think some of my conversation with Andy helped crystallize some of what I'm about to tell you. And a few things stand out for me. Number one, there would probably be 3 or 4 big, consistent traits that I think have applied to everyone we've talked to in this series, right? Kind of intangible things, but are very, very important. I think across the board, every single one of these best of the best folks we talked to, and I think this would apply to, just about anybody else we could pull in from the hunting world who achieves phenomenal success. They all have incredible drive, just tremendous drive to do this. They are very highly internally motivated to achieve whatever their goals are when it comes to deer hunting. And all of them have, proven that time and time again, and have had to make sacrifices and have had to make choices within their life to be able to prioritize this drive that they have for deer hunting. So number one, incredible drive, and they have made sacrifices to be able to execute on that drive for good and bad. I think number two, they are all independent thinkers. This is something that Dan Infalt pointed out explicitly himself, but I think all of them have taken a lead, not follow approach to deer hunting. They certainly learned from other people along the way, but they did not let that be the end of their hunting education. They supplemented what they learned from other people with hours and hours, days and days and weeks and months and years and thousands of hours in the field to learn these lessons themselves. The only way you can really become an absolutely best of the best elite deer hunter is to be in the field a lot, learning things the hard way. And if you do that, and if you allow yourself to try new things, to fail, to try again, to learn, to adjust, and never get stuck in any one way, never get stuck with just one person's approach and just doing everything they do. If you do that, you then have the opportunity to create your own style, to create your own hunting approach. And these elite deer hunters have done that. They are independent thinkers. They pulled all these different ideas from all across the hunting world into their own world and then made something unique and then learned to do that very well. Number three, I think every one of these folks is incredibly disciplined, in different ways, but all of them make a set of goals, tasks that they need to do, certain things throughout the off season leading up to the year, certain things in the season, and they stick to it. They say they're going to do something and they do it, right? They don't cut corners. They don't write out a to-do list and then skip a bunch of things. They execute. They check every box. They dot every I. They cross every T. They do all the little things right. They are disciplined. They stick to their guns. They do what needs to be done, and they don't make excuses. Very important. Number three, and I think this goes back to number one to a degree, but they all largely have a very single-minded focus. They're very focused on whitetail deer, and they have made a choice to focus intensely on this one thing and have sacrificed other things to allow for that. This came up over and over and over again. Other than, maybe Tony, who said he doesn't do this as much anymore. But everyone else pretty much said, I don't have other hobbies. I don't do other things. I don't go boating. I don't go ATVing. I don't go fishing. I don't do this thing or that thing. I just focus on whitetails. I think about whitetails all the time. This is what I pour my blood, sweat, and tears into. I've given my all to this. And some people have said, sometimes to the detriment of other things that maybe are very important in their lives. And I think that brings me to my final point, and a really important one, I think, which is that as I've thought about this, as I've listened to all these people and thought about what they've shared with us, and I recognize, and I want to make sure I make it very clear, I admire every one of them. I admire their success. I admire their drive and their focus and the results they have as deer hunters. And I appreciate the way they've helped so many of us learn through their experiences and what they've shared. But I've also come to find that maybe I don't want the same things. And maybe you don't either. Because I think it's very important to point out that everything they say they are doing and have done and will do, and the way they've prioritized their life and the way they've focused on certain things and taken time and energy away from other things, we each have our own personal decisions about how we want to prioritize our lives, how we want to delegate our energy and our time. But you don't need to do what these guys are doing. You don't need to chase the same goals that they are. You don't need to be Dan Infalt or Anja DeQuisto or Andy May or anybody else. I think it's very important that we be careful not to look at these folks in the hunting media who are incredible hunters and who I respect and admire and am impressed by. But we don't need to be that. We don't all need to kill $5 or $6 a year. We don't need to have Andy May level success. And it's okay if you don't, right? We need to remember that we are hunting our own hunts. And yeah, we want to get better. Yeah, we want to work hard. Yeah, we want to be the best we can be. But we also want to have fun. And maybe, at least in my case, I also want to be able to spend a lot of time with my kids in the woods. And that means I'm not going to kill as many big deer. And I also want to spend a lot of time in the spring and summer camping and hiking and fishing and doing things that 100% are taking time away from my ability to kill deer or prepare to kill deer. So no, I'm probably not going to kill 4 or 5 or 6 giant deer a year. I'm probably not going to kill booners every year like Ben Rising. I'm not going to have as many record book bucks as John Eberhart. I'm not going to put down the number of deer that Andy May does every year. And that's okay. And it's okay for you too. Whatever your goal is, whatever your number is, whatever it is you're chasing, it doesn't have to be like me. It doesn't have to be like Andy. It doesn't have to be like Tony or Ben or Andre or Dan or anybody else. Hunt for you. Hunt for the reasons that fill your cup, that satisfy you, that fulfill you, and pick and choose and learn from these different lessons we've had here throughout this series and all of my other episodes over the course of this podcast. But think about a really key thing that all these guys have said. To have the level of success they've had, and whether they've said this explicitly or not, it comes through. They have all had to make tremendous sacrifices. And think carefully if you want to make the same sacrifices yourself. Are big deer or a lot of deer on the wall worth missing family get-togethers or your son or daughter's soccer game or an anniversary dinner with your wife or whatever it might be? Is it worth it? Because a lot of guys chasing this thing miss those events. Or even if they're there physically, they might not be there mentally. Ben Rising talked about that being a problem he's recognizing himself. Is that how you want to do this? Is the Boone and Crockett buck worth spacing out during your kid's piano recital? Is obsessing over killing 3 mature deer this year and checking this box and checking that box and checking this box? Is it really worth it if you're miserable half the time? If you're stressed all fall? If you are grinding yourself to a pulp? I don't know. Maybe it is. And if it is, more power to you. Chase that dream. If that's what does it for you, if that is your number one priority, then absolutely go for it. We're seeing with these conversations that kind of focus is what's necessary to have that tippy top of the pyramid success. But I don't want anyone to think that that is necessary if you have different goals. Because if chasing whitetail deer leads to you missing out on things with your family or your faith or your community or balance in your life, actual happiness in your life, then we are going down the wrong path. And I worry that there's a lot of that happening in our community. And so I think we can learn a ton of positive things from these 6 folks we've talked to this week or this, past 6 weeks. And it's incredible. Great stuff. But I also want us to all take a little bit of time here to think about whether or not this is the right path for us as individuals and be honest about that, both with the sacrifices required if you want that, and also being honest with ourselves about what it is we actually want to get out of this. And knowing like, hey, if I don't want that kind of lifestyle because I do want balance or more family time or more fishing time or anything like that, that is okay. But then don't compare yourself to how Andy or Ben is doing on Instagram, right? We talked about this with, I can't remember who it was earlier this month, but comparison is the thief of joy. We have to stop comparing ourselves to every other hunter we see on social media or TV or in the Facebook group or whatever it is. We have to enjoy our community, build each other up, enjoy each other's success, but then have a very narrow focus when it comes to what we are doing. Because nobody really cares whether you kill a deer or not. Nobody is paying attention. Nobody understands what it takes for you personally, whatever sacrifices it might be, whatever energy it takes. That's a you thing, and it should be a you thing. And so don't let anybody else's choices, sacrifices, goals, success, do not let that influence how you hunt deer, how you derive satisfaction out of this thing, because hunting and fishing and doing these things in the natural world, it is such an incredible blessing. It's such an incredible privilege. It is tapping into one of the most human just one of the most core things of what it means to be human. And it's a really special thing in today's modern era that we still can do that. Don't tarnish that. Don't bastardize that by doing it for the wrong reasons or letting outside pressures ruin the joy of it in your own life. And certainly don't let that ruin other parts of your life that in the long run, when you're sitting on your deathbed, you'll recognize are so much more important. You're not going to be sitting there at 85, laying in the hospital bed, wishing you'd put one more booner on the wall. But if you've got a wall full of big deer, but you didn't spend time with your kids or your wife or with your community members or doing things that really, truly do matter in the long run, then you might really have some regrets. So I hope that we can come out of this series with lots of lessons learned, lots of ideas and ways we can become better deer hunters. Absolutely. But I think it would be a missed opportunity if we also didn't each take some time ourselves to think about if we're chasing the right thing and if we're okay with the sacrifices that we are making in order to chase those goals. So that's where my head's at after all of this. I think without any further ado, I will leave you with two very quick updates, kind of some house cleaning, and then we'll get to our chat with Andy May. House cleaning point, I can't say cleaning, house cleaning is what I'm trying to say. House cleaning point number one. As a reminder, we mentioned this last week, First Light has just launched their all-new line of whitetail hunting gear. I have been extensively involved in the design and testing process. So was Tony Peterson. Andy May was as well. Levi Morgan, a whole bunch of folks spent a lot of time trying this gear, testing this gear, sitting in Zoom meetings and real in-person meetings, spitballing about what we want, what we need, what we've been missing in the past, and the outcome is this set of gear. So highly recommend you check it out over at firstlight.com. House cleaning point number two is the Whitetail EDU series continues. These are the educational videos that Tony and I have been putting out every week over on the MeatEater Clips YouTube channel. Head on over there, check those out. We've had episodes about scrapes and rubs and deer droppings and tracks and all sorts of stuff like that. So lots more foundational whitetail education over there at the MeatEater Clips YouTube channel. So check that out. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this final episode of our Mindsets of the Whitetail Master series. And now, here's Mr. Andy May. All right. With me back on the show is a many-time repeat guest and a good friend, Mr. Andy May. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Mark. Yeah, it seems like it's been a little while. I reached out to you and thought maybe we could hop on one after the season. You know, I kind of like to do those season recaps, and you came up with this idea, which is pretty cool. I listened to one with Andre DeQuisto the other day, and it was pretty good. I like it.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you. Always appreciate you making time for this. Folks obviously have been learning a lot from you over the years since we've started having these podcast conversations and others that you've had. And as you know, the idea with this series has been to chat with the people who I look at as some of the very best of the best whitetail hunters out there, to try to better understand, what's going on behind the scenes, what's going on in their mind when they're thinking through their plans for the season or their plans for the day or dealing with struggles and challenges and adversity and understanding how they think about the building blocks of their success. And even though I know over the years you have resisted the title of like a whitetail expert or anything like that, you're stuck with it. And and so you're stuck with the burden of helping us all understand how you do it. And that's what I'm hoping we can do here today. So are you game to kind of open up like the hood of your brain and let us see inside for a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love this because I am kind of fascinated too about, different hunters that, I admire and how their brain works and how they've gotten to where they're at. So this is right up my alley. I kind of do the same on my own when I, you know, talk to guys and befriend guys and get to know them. I really like to learn how they tick and what motivates them and just how they get it done so consistently and continue to do that, year after year after year. And it's interesting because the guys that do it, they are unique individuals, and they all have their own strengths, and weaknesses. So yeah, this should be fun. I'm not even sure, how I'm going to answer yet, but we'll just see how it goes off the cuff.
That's perfect. See, you mentioned motivations, which is perfect because that's kind of the first thing that I like to kind of broach with people is getting a first look at why they are the way they are. Those motivations. So the first thing I want to hear from you, Andy, is how do you look at success? How do you define success as a deer hunter today?
Um, Today, um, it's probably changed and evolved over the years. Certainly at some point, um, the success is harvesting an animal. I mean, that is why I personally, one of the reasons is I put in so much time is to actually get the job done, during the season. It doesn't mean, killing two or three or four or five or six. It doesn't mean that, but like certainly there is some component of that, to being successful is actually going out and achieving the goal, that you set of harvesting an animal that you're trying to get. But like as I've gotten older, I've went through periods where, maybe I got so obsessed or so focused on one thing, I made hunting a little more stressful than I wanted. It wasn't as fun. And I think hunting should be fun. I mean, we love this, right? We absolutely love this. We live for hunting season. And to go through a hunting season where you're frustrated and wanting to quit, and you're not the best you can be at home as a father and as a husband, like that sucks. And I've been there. So having fun, I think, I would define that having fun in a season that's having success. Like you did what you love, you had a great time doing it. And for me personally, um, just new experiences. I am all about trying things new, going to new places, challenging myself in new types of terrain, new states, new species. Um, I would say those three things. And of course, I go there and I want to get something. But if I don't get something on a trip, I don't look at that as unsuccessful. I look at that as, especially if I'm going to a new place, like I took step one into learning this new thing, this new species, this new state, this new type of terrain, this new tactic. Um, and then I know, just because I've been able to do it, when I go out there again and I learn from my mistakes and I improve a little bit, eventually the success comes. But if I were to go a whole season and not kill anything, like not have an opportunity, or maybe I screw up my opportunities, there would be a part of me that would feel like I was unsuccessful, at least a part of it, you know? Um, so yeah, it's kind of a long drawn out answer, but I would say all those things: have fun, new experiences, challenging yourself. And then ultimately, yeah, I'd like to wrap my tag around something.
So elaborate on that last part though. You mentioned, you talked about, if you didn't kill anything the whole season, Can you describe a little bit more around your thoughts on failure? What other examples of failure there might be? What's something that would happen that you would truly view as like, man, that was really dropping the ball. Is there anything else other than just a season with zero tags filled in which you would call it a true failure?
Well, yeah. Like for one, kind of what I mentioned, if I go through a season where I felt like I didn't have fun, I came out a worse person. I'm a worse person at home. I'm frustrated. I'm stressed out. You're failing. Something's wrong there. You're putting too much emphasis on it, or you're not able to separate the highs and lows of, bow hunting with family life. I've gotten really good at that now. Like I can, have a really bad hunt where I screw up and blow it, and I can just kind of let it roll off my back, come home. And yeah, I mean, it's eaten me a little bit, but I'm able to still function and be a good person. Another thing for me that I definitely feel like I've failed is when I screw up an opportunity, when I make the error. That doesn't necessarily mean, sitting in the wrong spot. It means, I have my opportunity and I blow it. I wound the deer. I miss the deer. I make a stupid error, like I'm not paying attention, or I'm moving and the buck I want comes in and sees me, or I'm on my phone, and I lose my opportunity. Those are failures. Those are things that are like, God, like what an idiot. Like I work so hard, and how hard that opportunity is, and then you blow it like that. That's a tough pill to swallow. I can even handle missing a deer. I've talked to you about this. Like as long as I execute a good shot, like if I don't punch the trigger and I don't rush and I stay on it and I pull, or I execute a good shot and then something bad happens, I'm able to live with that because I feel like I did my part. The animal dropped, the animal moved. Maybe I hit something I didn't see. But if I like kind of lose my cool, I punch the trigger, I get so nervous, or I rush the shot, I wasn't able to calm myself down, that's on me. And now I wounded that animal, or I missed that animal, or I blew that opportunity because I screwed up. So that I can't stand for. And I still do it once in a while. It is bow hunting. I know it's a part of bow hunting, but it never gets any easier. Another thing that I think would be a failure is like quitting, on a hunt. Like there's been a couple of hunts where maybe they were tough, or maybe things were going on at home, that weren't like perfect. You get frustrated, you're getting your butt beat, and then like the next 2 days are 85 degrees, and you're like, I should just, I'll just go home, just cut my losses. I've done that once or twice, and you get about an hour down the road and you feel kind of like a piece of crap, like you're like, I literally just quit, and it's one thing if there's an emergency at home, that's different, but I'm talking like you're giving up, or a season, you're having a tough season and you just hang it up. You maybe you set some goals and you're not reaching them. It doesn't feel like you're going to reach them and you just quit. To me, that would be a failure for me. If I did that. So I don't do that anymore. I've done that a couple times early on, and even on a couple of hunts far from home, just like left a day early for no real reason other than it was a tough hunt, or it was hot and the weather wasn't right, or I screwed up and I'm like, oh my gosh. There was one comes to mind that, that hunt we did in Nebraska. Remember I was having that nerve pain in my back. You remember that? I had a whole nother day to hunt. But if you remember correctly, I had that opportunity at a very nice buck, and I had forgot my rangefinder. He was certainly in range, and I made a big time blunder. I literally grabbed my stuff out of your truck. I start walking down the 2-track, and I'm like, binoculars, rangefinder. I turn around and I see you bombing over the hill, and I'm like, oh no, But how far we were away from camp. I get my chance and I blew it. There's an error there, and it kind of let the wind out of my sails. I was dealing with some crazy back nerve pain, but I just quit on that hunt. I quit. I was like, stuff, I was dealing with some stuff at home with my daughter, and it's like, let's just go, and I look back at that one and maybe one or two other ones. It's like, I quit, yeah, I was in a lot of pain, but like, I'm tougher than that. I can grind it out. So those things for me would be failure, not having fun, screwing up your opportunity, making dumb errors. I try to give myself a little grace there because bow hunting is hard. But when I actually screw something up, I wasn't paying attention, or I make a bad shot because of something I did wrong. Those are the tough ones. Those are the ones where I just feel like, God, you can't be doing this. You're better than that. You're a veteran at this. These are not the mistakes you should be making.
Yeah. You mentioned one thing being a failure being to bring that negativity home, right? So you make a mistake or things aren't going well in the woods, and then you bring it home, and how it's hard sometimes to separate the in the field stuff from the home stuff. But you said you've gotten better at that, and I have to ask because I've struggled with this too. How have you gotten better at that? Is there anything specifically that has helped you to be able to leave what's in the woods, and then be able to be fully present with your family or at home, and not bring that negativity into the home atmosphere? Has there been anything that's helped you do that?
Um, Probably just experience, and seeing how it negatively affects my loved ones when I do that. If maybe I miss a deer, or I wound a buck or something, and I come home and I'm grumpy and I'm not talking to anybody and I'm stressed out, and I'm like, God, that was my chance. And it's like, these people didn't do anything, and here I am supposed to be the leader of this family, um and I'm bringing that negativity home. I've just realized over the years that, like, I love hunting. I'm a hunter. Um, it's part of what I am, but it's a small part. I'm a father. I'm a partner. I'm a husband. Um, and those things are just more important to me. And I've seen it negatively affect them, and then it causes stress in the relationship. It causes stress between, father and daughter. And, I just don't want to let that time be affected and slip. I think too, I've learned that over the years, like, I'm going to get another opportunity. I've made mistakes. I've worked so hard at eliminating mistakes. I mean, I train my body, I train my mind, I shoot, I scout, I do everything as far as preparation that I can think of that will help me be successful. And I still fail sometimes. And it's okay. Bow hunting is hard. And I've learned that these mistakes are going to come. When I make them, I'm going to do everything I can to correct them. When something bad happens out there that was out of my control, I just let it go. I just let it go. I'm going to have more opportunities down the road. I'm not going to bring that home. I'm not going to affect my loved ones like that. So I think over time, you realize that it's not the end of the world. It would be the end of the world if your wife leaves you. It would be the end of the world if your daughter feels like you weren't there for her. Or she moves off to college and you're like, what was I doing? Like, why was I spending that much time, or obsessing about it that much, that it made me not be present, or made her feel like I wasn't there for her? To me, that would be the end of the world. Like, that would be something that would hang with me the rest of my life. So I don't know. I've just realized that, partially just from my own mistakes, listening to other guys, other really good hunters that we know, that admit that that's what they chose to do, throughout their career. And a lot of them regret it. So if anything, I hope people see me and realize, like, yeah, maybe you won't be, at that, what some consider that elite level, but you can still have a lot of success. You can still have a lot of fun. You can still kill a lot of animals and have a lot of experiences, and still be a good husband, still be a good dad, do the extra things while you're there, be extra present while you're there. It's important that I'm there, but it's also important that, Sienna and Lisa, I want them to see that I have a passion. I want them to see that I have something that drives me. It makes me a better person. It gives me direction. It gives me something that makes me want to work out more. It makes me want to be outside more. It makes me a better person when I come home. And my daughter sees me go out every day. She sees me go to the gym every day, and she sees me go out and shoot my bow just about every day. And, maybe she's not going to be a hunter, but maybe she's going to be something else. And she, or maybe it's her career. And she's going to be like, that's why Dad was good at that, because he devoted so much time. And I feel like, this is pretty much all I do. And certainly it can seem, obsessive, but I try my best to pick out little windows when to work on these things and just prioritize, the family, and make sure everything there is handled and solid. And if it's not, I'll put in more time in that, less time in the preparation until things even out and I find that good equilibrium. So I think it just takes time. Obviously communicating with your family, making sure everybody is good to go, and kind of understands, what your plans are. But yeah, it's hard, and I find myself self-correcting, every year. I've learned to just kind of anticipate that before it gets to a boiling point. But I don't know. I try to emphasize that because I've seen guys I know that have just ruined their marriage or ruined their relationship with their kids or missed out on all those opportunities when they were little. And I don't know, it's just not for me. It makes me sad. So
Yeah, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So one more question on failure, and this will be a little bit different though. I'm curious about your favorite failure, or the most useful failure, or the failure or the mistake that you made that coming out of that you learned something that changed your trajectory moving forward. Is there anything that comes to mind over the years that, man, you really screwed it up, but man, you learned from that one and it made all the difference?
So yeah, coming out of that season, just feeling about as low as I can feel as a bow hunter. I decided that I was going to do whatever it took to fix it. And I realized I was dealing with some target panic. I had done some research. So I started, talking to the right people, reaching out to guys that were more skilled as me as an archer, and really learned what target panic was and how to beat it. So you and I have talked about that a lot. I'm not going to dive deep into that, but I did the work all off season. Just pounded away, learning a whole different shot execution, a different way to wire your brain during the shot, changed releases up. And I was shooting better than I ever had with no anticipation, with no panic, and everything was going phenomenal. In fact, I was going into that next season, 2013, with a lot of confidence. And for some reason, I don't know why I did this. I was going to Maryland for an early season hunt, and 2 days before I left, I hadn't punched the trigger or had any issues. About 2 days before I left, I decided to go back to my old release, just because I was using a hinge release and to help me get past the target panic. And I just felt like I just feel more comfortable hunting with an index finger. So I went to Maryland. I went on that trip, and sure enough, I get a chance at a big buck, and I do the same exact thing, and I just punch that trigger and miss him. So I threw that release away. Right after that, I was just absolutely disgusted with myself. Went back to the drawing board as far as the drills that you and I have, talked about, and switched to basically using a thumb button or a hinge, and just executing a shot in a completely different way. And I never had that issue again. To this day, I've still never had target panic. I mean, a little anticipation will sometimes come in, but I never change the way I execute a shot. I never punched the trigger. But But to this day, I still continue with those same drills, just to make sure that I'm staying ahead of it. I realized it was an issue for me. But that made such a huge impact on my enjoyment for archery, my shots on animals before, which were very marginal, even though I was getting most of them. Now I was getting many more good shots with short track jobs, just what you want, putting that animal down quickly so that they don't have to suffer, and just getting it done in a much cleaner, more ethical way. So that was probably, that stands out to me the most as having the biggest impact, because it was impacting me in such a negative way. I was able to get on deer. I was able to put myself in front of deer. And that was kind of a slow progression. There was never one big change where it's like, all of a sudden I was shooting big bucks. No, I had to climb the ladder. I was young, and I was persistent, and I was hardworking, and I was able to get maybe a shot or maybe two shots at a nice buck in a whole season. And just the way my brain works, learning and constantly trying to improve, I just slowly climbed that ladder of, maybe getting 2 or 3 shots or 3 or 4 shots. And then it was from like 2-year-old bucks to 2 and 3-year-old bucks, and then 3 and 4-year-old bucks, and then so on. So there were certainly things, tactics, that made a change and helped me grow as a hunter and kind of increase that skill. But that, mastering that shot execution under high pressure is what made the most impact, and has certainly put the most animals on the ground for me.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was going to ask you about was about your process for getting better at something. And you kind of just gave us a perfect example there of how to get better at your shot sequence. So it sounded like some of the things you did were, first, like, identify the problem, like identify the thing you have to work on. Number two, it seemed like you then went back to the drawing board and said, okay, who can I seek out, who has more information about this, who is better at this, who's been through this. You scoured for other sources of, resources to help you. And then three, you just worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. Um, is that 3-part process the process you take to get better at something within the deer hunting world, or did I miss a step there? Or is there anything else you would add to that if you were trying to tell someone, like, man, this is how I address a problem or address a weak area?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think you said it. You have to admit that you have that problem or that weakness. I go back to what you and I have talked about a few times. Like, there were periods where I was, very successful in the pre-rut and rut, but like late season and early season, I would have very intermittent success. It just wasn't that much. I wasn't shooting mature animals in that time frame nearly as much, and I think that could be said for most of the hunters out there. But I saw people doing it, and whenever I see someone doing something that I can't do or that I'm not doing in the bow hunting world, I take interest in that very, very closely. And one, because the way my mindset is I want to constantly be better. I want to constantly improve as a bow hunter. I have no interest in like setting myself up with a scenario, maybe like a farm or a tactic or a style, and then just kind of riding that out, and just filling a wall full of big bucks. Like, that doesn't really interest me. It doesn't motivate me. But getting better at something when you think you're not good at it, that motivates me very much. So when I see guys like Jesse Coots, who's killing his target buck on the first day of the season 4 years in a row or whatever it was, I'm like, what? Like, how? So, and here I am, hunting every opening day for, 15, 17 years, and I have maybe a couple bucks under my belt early season, So, yeah, I sought out who in my mind was the expert or the person that was doing it at such an elite level. and learned everything I could from him. And then I implemented that. Then I put in that work that he was doing to be so successful at that time. Same thing with with ground hunting. I always did a bit of ground hunting when I thought the situation called for it, but I was never like super confident in it. I got busted a lot. I always felt better up in a tree. I mean, you're watching the TV guys up in the tree. You're watching, reading North American Whitetail. It's talking about tree stand placement. It really wasn't a thing. And then all of a sudden you see guys that are doing it at a high level, like a Jared Scheffler or something. It's like, wait, that guy has skills that I don't have, So that inspires me. And that kind of revamps my motivation in bow hunting to like master that versatility, that being able to apply all sorts of tactics when the situation is right. And you can keep going further down the line. Like, I was good in farm and marsh and swamps and river bottoms, but like you put me in the big woods and the hills, I kind of felt lost. Even though I could still get on deer, I was like, I kind of didn't feel like I had that confidence. And so, I start talking to guys that's their bread and butter, and the guys that get it done in that scenario. And then I put myself in that scenario to really learn it and to really get effective at it, in multiple types of terrain, multiple states, multiple types of habitat, multiple tactics. And it's just, it's kind of evolved into this like versatile style where I feel very confident, whether it's, using a decoy, whether it's still hunting with a bow, whether it's a typical tree stand, whether it's sneaking in close to a bed, or, finding a good rut spot and grinding it out for a few days. I have that confidence to do it when I think that's the right move. Now, I'm not always right, but I think that versatility has made me a much better hunter than I was early on. And it's made me effective throughout the season from start to finish in multiple different areas, multiple different types of terrain, multiple different levels of hunting pressure. And it's, you said it in the beginning, like I don't really consider myself an elite hunter because I still make mistakes all the time. And I'm still like second guessing myself all the time. But it certainly has improved me as a hunter. And I feel the confidence that I can go anywhere and be effective. So I don't know, that's kind of the long way around that answer, but that versatility, is real important.
Yeah. And that versatility and the experience that got you to that point is, I think, the secret to confidence in many cases, right? And confidence is that intangible that makes such a difference during a hunting season. So yeah, I 100% get what you're saying there. Tell me this. You mentioned a bunch of things over the last 20, 30 minutes that I imagine you do consistently. Things about like the way you approach, I don't know, your archery, your physical fitness, your scouting. There's a lot of things that you seem to consistently tackle. You do things on a consistent basis to lead to consistent success. And another way to talk about these kinds of things would be habits. So I want to ask you a couple questions about your habits. And number one, right out the gate, what would you say is your very most important habit?
In regards to being successful as a bow hunter, I would say I kind of have a habitual routine kind of throughout the year, and I don't really I don't vary from it, and I don't take away from it. If anything, I just add to it. But it kind of revolves around going to the gym to make sure my body is strong and ready, but also my mind. So yes, I enjoy working out. It relieves my stress. It makes me feel good. I like to feel strong. I like to feel able. When I was 19, 20, 25, I was like, like most guys that age, full of testosterone. I just want to be big and muscular. Now I don't even care about that. I want to be effective in the woods. And I know, whitetail hunting is kind of a thing where you don't necessarily need to be strong and fit, but I like to hunt other species. As you can see, like some of these deer behind me, they're mule deer. Some are high country, some are desert, some are, Western plains. They require a lot of miles. They require a lot of flexibility and agility and endurance. So my workouts now are kind of geared more towards that. But I mentioned the mental part too. Doing that consistently just builds a strong mind. It builds mental toughness. So I choose to get up at 5 because I don't want to get up at 5. I choose to get up at 5 to get it done and to start my day because it's hard. It sucks. Like every time I'm like, oh God, dang, every time I bitch about it, but I don't sit there. I don't grab my phone and him and haw. No, it goes off. I hit that thing probably within 3 seconds. And I sit up and I sit there and I stretch my back and I kind of do this and everything's creaking and cracking. And it's like, oh my gosh. And I get up and I'm stiff. I got a bad back. I get up, I'm stiff. I can barely stand up straight. And then all of a sudden I just start moving and everything starts loosening up. And I go to the gym and I do things to kind of preserve all these ailments that I'm having as I age and to make them strong. But that getting up early and forcing myself to do it, it's like a mental hurdle that I start my day off with. And then it also doesn't interfere with family time. I'm not like working a full work day and then going to the gym for an hour and a half and then getting home. It's like, no, I'm maximizing. I can come home and spend time with the family and still get my arrows in. But it's, that's something that is a habit. That's a routine of mine year long. And I kind of ramp that up leading up to the season. And my motivation is to be able to do this as long as I can. And I understand like whitetail hunting, you don't need to do it as much, but I still think it's important. I still think it helps you. Yeah, and I want to be able to climb it. I mean, look at John Eberhart. I mean, the dude's 74 or whatever he is, and he's still prepping, 40-some trees, 30 foot up in the air. I remember a couple of years ago, he called me. I don't remember what he called me about, but he was like, he was hacking a trail through a marsh, like to get to this tree. I'm like, what? I'm like, God, this guy's a machine, but I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to go to the mountains and crush. And that's a big time reason why I hunt with a lot of these younger guys out there, because a lot of guys my age don't want to do it anymore. I'm approaching 50, but I feel great out there. I mean, I still feel great out there. In addition to that, yes, you mentioned my archery. I love archery. Archery is like a meditation for me. It's like therapy. I love shooting my bow. I do it just about every day. I mean, certainly, you go on trips and stuff. You can't always bring your bow, but it might not be, 5 minutes I go out there and fling a few arrows, or I might go out there for an hour. There's been days where I've literally went out 3 or 4 different times, 3 or 4 different sessions when I have like a day off or something and people are doing stuff and I have that time. But I set aside time each year, when I'm coming out of the season, to build that muscle memory back, build that strength, shoot those reps indoors when it's snowy and cold out, build that strength, build that shot execution, go through those target panic drills. Then when it starts getting nice out, then I go to testing. I'll test my gear. I'll try some new fletching. I'll try some new arrows. I'll try some new heads, maybe tweak my bow a little bit, trying to find little ways to improve my gear, improve the forgiveness, improve the consistency. And I'll carry that on through, April, May, June. The past few years, I've been trying to, stay active, bow hunting, doing some turkey, some bear, some axis deer, just to stay sharp. That's been helpful. But then as I get into mid-July, late July, I want to settle in on something. If I'm going to make any changes, I want to settle in on it and commit to it. And then I switch to what I call like archery, archery training, almost bow hunting training, where I'm going out, I'm ranging, boom, down, come to full draw, execute a good shot, up in a tree, in my saddle, in a tree stand, down on the ground, on my knees. I got a great backyard where I can shoot out past 100 yards. And there's woods on the side where I can kind of get up on the side hill so I can get uneven footing shooting out through holes. So everything is like realistic. Because I hunt a lot on the ground, because I hunt a lot out west, I shoot from my knees, I shoot from my butt, I shoot on uneven ground, I shoot through holes. And I try to make things realistic to what I find when I bow hunt. Because as you know, I mean, very rarely, unless you're on like a managed farm where you can kind of set up and you know kind of know where the deer are kind of come from and come to you, then you can maybe set up some really good seated shots out of a tree stand. But a lot of times when we're hunting new areas, we don't have that. We're not able to trim. You're going up in a tree that's not perfect. You end up with a weird shot angle like this. You're off balance. You're bending down. You're hunching down. Those things are hard. And realistically, how many guys practice that? We practice flat-footed in the backyard at 20, 30, 40, and then we go to wherever, Ohio, and you get up in this tree, and then you got this buck running down off the ridge, and you can't trim, and there he is at 29, and you're trying to get a shot through like this. Like, those are the shots we get. And the way I look at it is I have to train for that. I have to train and put myself through those types of scenarios if I'm going to be expected to do it in the most high pressure moment of my season. If I don't, of course I'm going to fail. Of course I'm going to hit them high. Of course I'm going to hit them back. Of course I'm going to miss. Of course I'm going to rush the shot because I haven't tried it even once. So I've ingrained that into my routine, into that late summer routine where I am trying hard shots, things that are very challenging my balance, challenging my footing, shooting through holes, learning my trajectory. And that's kind of where I'm at right now with stuff. And Lisa always makes fun of me. She goes, "What?" I said, "I'm going to go shoot my bow." And she'll go, "You're going to go roll around in the grass again?" Because she comes out on the deck and she sees me like I'm on my knees and I'm hunched over and I draw like this. And then I set up and shoot, she calls it rolling around in the grass. So, but that's my mindset. That's my mindset is like, I'm preparing for those scenarios. Like last year, I killed 2 bucks off the ground, one on my knees that I had to basically sneak through this hedgerow to get to, got down on my knees, stopped him, and came to full draw all in one motion. And it was a shot towards kind of the end of what I consider like my ethical, extended range there, put a great shot on him. If I don't train that stuff, I don't have that opportunity, or if I take it, something bad happens. So then, during the season, then I'm kind of head down, grinding through the season, but I will still make time to go out there, check my marks. The bow is a machine. The machine changes throughout the season, whether you think so or not, it does. You put it in your truck and it's 85 degrees in there, and then you pull it out and then you put it back in, the strings stretch. Now, if you're a 20-yard, max shot or 30-yard max shot, you might not know it. It might change this much at a target. That's not much. But when you're going out west, where you might be hunting some of these mule deer or those antelope down there, it's like, those are longer shots. A 2 or 3 inch change at 20, 30 yards is a 5, 6, 7 inch change out there. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. So constantly checking those marks, making sure you're good, making sure your form and your execution is good. I do that kind of throughout the season. And then, when season ends, I start the whole thing all over again. And that is consistency. Within all of that, that's kind of like working on myself. But throughout the year, hunting season, before hunting season, after hunting season, I am scouting as much as I can. Sometimes I get big windows where I can scout a ton, and I scout a ton. And then there's other times where there's a lot of family stuff and I can barely find time to get out. So I might scout for an hour, or I might go glassing for the last 45 minutes of daylight. What I try to do is prioritize windows of scouting when I make sure I get in what I feel like I need to be successful. And that is postseason, kind of, before spring green up, before, when the snow melts, before, before it gets really thick with vegetation. That is a window where I feel I need to be out there. I need to gather some information. If I'm going to a new area or a new state that's going to be during the rut, I want to be able to look during that time, because I can break it apart easily. I can see things easily, and things make very good sense to me. I can move into that area with really high confidence, whether I find a good buck bed or whether it's going to be a rut hunt, and I can put myself in a situation where I think I have a high chance of success during the rut. And then, through the rest of the summer, kind of like midsummer, it's not as important for me to get out. So I won't push it. I'll spend more time with the family, but when I do get those windows, I'll still go out. I'll tie up, some loose ends that I wasn't able to get to in that window where I prefer to get out. I can still gain some really good knowledge during that time. It's just a little harder because things are starting to thicken up. But that's not a time where I push to get out in the woods a lot. It's just not. The return on investment there, I think, is lower. And then as I get closer to the beginning of the season, I have another window where I need to be out there if I want to get on a buck early. And that's like those 2.5 weeks leading up to the season. That is a window where I will spend some time out glassing. I will put some cameras in spots where I can't glass. I will walk perimeter of some food sources, trying to, see if I can cut a big track. I use those 3 methods there. Glassing when I can glass. If it sets up well for glassing, I'll glass. If it doesn't set up well for glassing, I'll use camera work, and I'll put those down in those spots where I can't see, or if it's too thick, and try to do, maybe a check before season. And then the other one is literally just kind of walking the perimeter of where, marsh meets food source, or woods meets food source, and cutting a track. And then a lot of times what I can do is I can look at a map, or I can scout my way back in, and I can get pretty darn good at anticipating where, that buck is bedded. It might not have the exact bed, but I can, a lot of times, just from knowledge and experience, I can estimate that, he's probably right in here, and I can probably access through here, and I can probably set up here and have a realistic chance. If it's a higher pressure setting, I'm probably going to push back a little further. If it's a lower pressure setting like Kentucky or something, I might favor more towards the field or the food source. So these are all experiences that I've had, in the past, and all these things are going through my head. I'm really kind of relying on a lot of past experience and instinctual feelings to make these decisions. But that's, and then throughout the season, it's scout a lot, hunt when I can, or when I think the time is right. So it's still very much scouting heavy, hunt a little less. That has to do more with my schedule, not necessarily what I want to do. But that makes me, all those things that I told you, and then that in-season scouting, and then those high percentage sits is what makes me pretty efficient on limited time.
Yeah. So you talked about a lot of those things that you've done over your experiences over the years, many years, have led to you now, having the confidence to be able to pick apart a place, or identify the spot within the spot when you find it, or when you've cut that track, whatever it might be. So that's kind of alluding to your past history, all adding up to where you are now. That led to me thinking about, or leading me to be curious about something that has happened more recently for you. So I'm curious, is there anything over the last few years that has changed for you, a new belief, a new habit, a new behavior that's really improved things for you? Is there any recent thing that all of a sudden you've picked up and been like, this helps, or this new idea helps, or this new habit has made a difference? Anything come to mind?
Well, I guess a couple of tactics come to mind that I've definitely done more frequently. I've done them in the past too, but as I alluded to kind of earlier, we were talking about it. I didn't do it as much. Um, the ground hunting and decoy usage, I've been using a lot more. Mainly the ground hunting. We all know, like, setting up on the ground. You can set up on the ground just like you would a tree stand in like an ambush style situation. But I'm talking more. I Justin Wright and we call it like slip hunting. So essentially, you'd be going into maybe it is an area you're familiar with, and that's fine, or an area you're not familiar with, and you're going in, and what I would wear is like my tree saddle, and then I would have like a platform with a set of sticks strapped to my back, like on a predator pack or something, just very minimalistic, a bow rope and my bow. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of planning a route through there, through the terrain that I pick out ahead of time. And I'm moving through still hunting with the goal of, a few things. Optimally, like the number one greatest thing would be I get eyes on a buck, and now I'm in some sort of situation where I might be able to sneak closer, spot and stalk, or just, get closer, let him make the last move. That doesn't happen that often. It does sometimes, especially in more open terrain, especially like if you're out, during the rut or something, it could happen quite a bit that way because deer are more active throughout the day. The other scenario where that's really valuable is I'm slipping through and I'm scouting. I'm hunting, but I'm scouting, and I come across the sign that tells me that this is a good spot, or maybe I should sit this now. Now I'm ready to go with my gear to hunt that sign if I feel like, or I can, kind of play off my instincts and see if I feel like I need to follow that sign back a little more. But by having that confidence to go in there, you might get a visual, or you might come across the sign that tells you that this spot is worth hunting, or you might work through that whole area. Another thing that's not bad at all, and I welcome this every time, is you actually bump a buck. You bump a buck. Yeah, it sucks. You don't necessarily want to do that, but now you know where one is. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't apply that tactic, that slip hunting tactic. So now I'm in the game with a buck. Maybe it's a soft bump and I can get him coming back. I've pulled that off a couple times. Justin's pulled that off 5 or 6 times. Maybe you bump him a little harder and he goes over the ridge, and it's like, okay, that's fine. Now I know the general area where this is, and we can start playing that game. So all 3 of those things are good, right? All 3 of those things wouldn't have happened if I didn't apply that tactic. And then the last one is you work through that whole area and you don't see anything exciting, and you just write that area off. So when I started doing this more, it started putting me in front of big deer more often. It started creating situations for me. It started leading me towards sign that I never would have seen if I wasn't more kind of willing to go in there and aggressively scout those areas. Now, I'm not saying do this on your 40 acres that you're leased out, that you have presets and you have a food plot planted. I'm not saying to do that. That wouldn't, I don't think that would necessarily be appropriate. But you might be able to do it on a small scale. Like maybe there's a little pocket over here that you see some tracks coming out of, and you're like, what? Oh, man, I didn't even consider that. So you kind of go over there with, your mobile setup, and you follow the sign in, and you're very careful. Obviously, it's a smaller piece, so you're going to be much more delicate with your approach. And maybe you find a spot to set up and capitalize on that. But like in an area where maybe you have a few different spots to hunt and they aren't panning out, and it's like, okay, I'm going to try this spot. I'm going to try this public piece or this permission piece that I never hunt, and then you apply that. That has opened up so many doors for me. in all of those scenarios that I mentioned, I run into a buck, I see him, and I spot and stalk. That has happened. I come into hot sign and I end up setting up right there. I've had that work and end up shooting a buck. And then I've also bumped a buck, and now I'm in the game with that deer where I otherwise wouldn't have been. And then many times I scout my way through and I don't learn anything other than the lay of the land, but maybe I see something that's like, hey, that doesn't have big buck sign, but like, man, I bumped 15 or 20 different does. Like, I'm going to come back here during the rut. All that's valuable, and all that is due to that kind of slip hunting style. And then I mentioned the decoy thing. The decoy thing has really opened some doors for me, kind of more in that open country. And I gained one of my biggest whitetails. He's upstairs, but my biggest Michigan whitetail. He was the biggest buck in the state, killed in 2006 with a bow. And I killed him over a decoy. And it's crazy, like just like the old 3D style decoy, the carry light. I still have that decoy. I still use it. So I knew it can be effective, even though it's not as effective in Michigan in general. I knew it could be effective, but I had guys. My buddy Mark Jost, he's killed 50 big whitetails over decoys. I don't even know how many. It's insane. You see what Jared Scheffler's done. Jesse Coots, out in Kansas with his decoy. And I start seeing these guys. I'm like, okay, there is something here. There is something here to this that I am missing out on. So I, bought some more mobile type decoys, and I've been using them more in the last few years. And that has really created some awesome hunts. I've shot 2 deer using those. I missed my target buck last year. In a snowstorm. It was like a white out snowstorm in November. It was just weird. It like blew in for like 20 minutes, and I'm just like, looking down, and my bow is white. I'm all white, and like I'm looking out into this field, and I can't see anything. And then all of a sudden, I look up, and my decoy's out there, and there's this big old buck like right at it. And I'm like, holy smokes, and I come to full draw. And as I'm at full draw, I look and I see like all that white down my arrow. And I'm like, oh my gosh, So I'm trying to decide, like, is this going to affect my arrow? And I didn't want to make any changes. So I put the pin right on him and I shot. My arrow went right into the dirt. I ended up shooting that buck later on, like about a week later, from the ground, spot and stalk. So it's created just a new excitement level, and that kind of that open country. And what I found is like some of the areas I hunt that are really open, I think that that's a huge advantage to have that. So last year I was after that buck. He's over there somewhere. But I was after that buck several times, and I kept seeing him out in the open. And I always had that decoy with me. I made a post. It's a heads up decoy. And I always had that thing with me. So I had my bow in one hand, this in one hand, and I was always on the ground. And I was always sneaking around, slipping around, glassing, because he was very visual, but he was always out in the open. And he was just where I couldn't get to him. So that decoy played a really key role in drawing him into bow range. Yeah, I'd say those two things, adopting those two strategies, have, over the last 5-7 years, I've gained a lot of confidence in those, and they've made me a better hunter, more versatile type hunter for sure.
Yeah, goes back to what you said about that versatility. Like if you are a one-trick pony, you are vulnerable, right? If there's only one place you can get it done or one way you can get it done, inevitably in a hunting season, there are going to be times when that thing's not going to work out, or something changes and your spot isn't what it was, or your tactic isn't what it was. You have to have more tools in the toolbox. And you are a really good example of that. I want to shift a little bit towards 3 kind of intangibles, but the more I think about it, I think they might be the three, or at least in my mind, maybe the three most important intangibles for consistent deer hunting success. Those three things being hard work or your work ethic, number two, mental toughness, and number three, decision making. Like those three things, work ethic, mental toughness, and decision making, I think form a huge part of what makes anyone successful. So I'd like to walk through each one of those with you to understand how you look at those three things. And so maybe let's start with work ethic or hard work in the context of deer hunting. Andy, how would you define hard work as a deer hunter? How would you illustrate that in your own life? Like, what does hard work look like for you? Because we all talk about, you got to work hard, right? You hear that all the time. But I think what we might think when we hear someone say that versus what it actually looks like on the ground for the very most successful deer hunters probably looks a little bit different. And you've given us some examples already, but could you elaborate a little bit in your life, in your deer hunting world? Hard work, what does it look like? What does it mean?
I think, when you hear hard work, you're thinking like, sweating and, you're using your strength or your endurance and, you're out of breath. That certainly comes into play, at certain times, for sure. But like hard work to me with deer hunting, a lot is just being consistent with your effort that is going to eventually end in a successful result. So to me, hard work could be, I can't get out today, but I'm going to sit at my computer and there's this buck I'm going to target in 2024. I'm going to go through all of the data I have on him, all the sightings, all the trail camera data, and I'm going to see if I can come up with some patterns, something that will help me. Hard work could be staying consistent, going out and shooting your bow constantly. The guy that does that and does that properly, I mean, he's going to be at an advantage when that opportunity comes. Hard work could be, going out. If you have your 80 acres and you're out there in the summer and you're trimming your spots so that all of your shooting lanes are clear and you're going to have good, clear shots. Your stands are set. Everything is prepped. You got mock scrapes set in, you got your cameras out, you got all this stuff ready to go, and you've done the work, you've set the stage for a successful season. Maybe for a more public land oriented guy, it's you've done sufficient scouting. You've scouted, this piece and this piece and this piece. You've narrowed it down to, your 3 or 4 spots on here that you're going to focus on during the rut. And then, over here, this spot had a big buck early season and you're trying to learn as much as you can about him. You're in there, you're figuring out, all right, I knew he was bedded on this ridge and okay, I found a bed on this point and here's the oak flat down here at the bottom and looks like he might cross down here at the bottom. This seems like a good funnel. Like you're constantly working at setting yourself up for success. I mean, all of those things to me are hard work. Like hard work can just be showing up consistently in a manner that is going to set yourself up for success. And yeah, I mean, I've been on some hunts where hard work is you're beating your body to a bloody pulp to get, up a mountain into this basin that is, 3 ridge lines over. Maybe if you're hunting elk or you're hunting mule deer or something like that, that's hard work. I mean, that's something not a lot of people can do. But it's interesting though too, because like I've seen guys do that aren't necessarily like fit. They're tough. They're just tough and they don't quit. So that is a big intangible there of just being mentally tough and not quitting and being able to do kind of whatever it takes and take your lumps. But yeah, I don't know. I would say that hard work could be a lot of different things, but it's really, if you see the guys that are real successful at the highest level, and I'm talking about guys that can, you can pretty much throw them anywhere and they're going to have success. It's something that they do in some way, shape, or form year round. They're doing something almost year round. Yeah, they might take breaks to do bass fishing. They might take breaks to do some fly fishing, but they're still working out. They're still running. They're still shooting their bow. They're still, when they get a minute, they're getting online and looking at that Kansas piece of public in Kansas where they're going to be in November. It's a consistent focus on that and different ways that is going to set yourself up for success. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're like killing yourself physically. It could be, like I said, as little as, sitting down and breaking down some data. To me, that is all hard work. It's all consistency, and it all leads to success. But yeah, there's a lot of times where like guys will just physically outwork guys. Maybe you're on a hunt and this guy is going in early. He's sitting all day. He's hiking a mile and a half back. He's putting in way more work than this guy that's kind of sleeping in. He's dragging, he's kind of walking out in gray light. He comes back in at 9. I saw a couple does, both still hunting the same area, both still on the same hunt, but there's one guy that's clearly outworking the other. And that's the guy that deserves the success. It should be the guy that puts in more time, more effort, is a little more creative with his thinking, a little more focused. Those guys should come out on top. That's the way it's supposed to be. So
what about not the flip side, but kind of the cousin of that, the mental side of that? So mental toughness.
Yep.
How would you describe that, and in what ways do you find that to be important for you?
That's real important with bow hunting because in bow hunting, you fail a lot. And it's hard. Bow hunting is hard. Even these days with these compound bows and all this technology, it's still hard, man. It is really hard. You start throwing in some difficult states, older age class deer, different species. It's hard. And you have to be able to accept the failure and not let it affect you to the point where it's going to lead into another mistake or another failure. You have to learn from it and try to improve, if you made the mistake, and stay positive and just keep moving forward. Keep trying to improve, keep trying to eliminate those mistakes. It's staying consistent, like I mentioned, the gym thing, that's mental toughness. It's like being able to override yourself, override that comfort, override what you'd rather do for something that you should do that's going to make you better, make you healthier, improve your life, improve your mood, improve your hunting. That's mental toughness. I mean, it's you're pushing through kind of that weak voice that you have. You're on day 7 of the rut. You've hunted all day, 6 out of 7 days, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And you force yourself to get up and get out there, and then you're rewarded with the buck, the buck that you've been after. That's mental toughness. I think, that comes into play big time with bow hunting because you are going to fail. You're going to fail a ton. You're going to miss. You're going to you're going to wound animals. You're going to feel like a piece of crap. You're going to feel like you suck. I feel like I suck every hunting season at some point. Every hunting season, I feel like I'm not sure if I'm going to kill another deer in my life. I seriously feel that. I literally feel that. And there's times where I'll be out there, I'll be like, how did I ever get an arrow in one of these? How did I ever do it? And then it happens. The playbook that I follow works. It does work, but you are going to fail. You're going to fall on your face. You just have to pick yourself up, not let it beat you up too bad. I do think making, big mistakes are as painful as they are, they're good because it's usually those big ones that hurt or that affect you so deeply. Those are usually the ones that spark the biggest change. Those are the ones that are like, okay, enough is enough. I'm not doing that again, And yes, you screwed up on that one buck, but it ends up getting you 10 other ones down the road. So give yourself some grace. Be patient with yourself. You're going to make mistakes. Let them roll off your back, but use them. There's value in those. So you have to use those. And if you don't even think about it, you're just like, oh, it's bad luck or whatever. And you don't think about it. You don't try to correct it. You don't think about why that deer did this or why did I do that? What happened? What went wrong? It's going to happen again. And just that mindset in general, overall, over the long term, it makes you deadly. It makes you very, very deadly, because then you start to, eliminate some of those options that could go wrong, mitigate them as much as you can. And then you're just set up for success, much more, with that type of mindset.
So true. So then the last of these key intangibles then, decision making. So you've got to put in the hard work to put yourself in position for success. You need to have the mental toughness to deal with adversity, to maintain consistency, to be out there in the right mindset. But then decision making, this is kind of in the day to day when you're deciding, what do I do today? How do I handle the situation? Where do I go? When do I hunt? Which deer do I hunt? Which tree do I hunt? While you're working your way through the woods and you're scouting, do I stop here or do I keep going? Is this the spot? Is this not the spot? I find myself every season so many different times in that scenario, in one of those scenarios, with my mental gears turning and turning, and I'm a thinker and sometimes an overthinker, and it's kind of torture in the moment sometimes, or I'm up all night thinking about what should I do. So it's both my favorite thing and my least favorite thing about hunting, maybe, is that part, but mostly my favorite. So I'm curious with you, what does your decision making process look like in any one of those scenarios? How do you weigh the costs and benefits, or the pros and cons, or this spot versus that spot? Because there's 1,000 different decisions we need to make over the course of a deer hunting season, and oftentimes they're very important.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good one. Because I know you are that type, you have that type of brain, and you are that person that really thinks and can fall into overthinking to the point where you're frozen almost. And I am I'm probably I'm definitely different than that, but I can relate to that because I do love data. And I have collected a lot of data over the years to look for trends and stuff. But what I've really found, that's been helpful to me is that I've learned just to kind of rely on my gut and rely on my instincts. And I enjoy that much more than being kind of overwhelmed with information and data. And I still like data because it's great for learning, and you could plug that in and it can still kind of affect those instincts. But, these develop over time. And I think, you have a lot of experience, a lot of different areas. I think you'd be surprised if you tapped into those a little more, just how effective you can be. We've kind of, these days with trail cameras and glassing and cell cameras and software that breaks this down and that, it's made it possible to just gather a lot of data, even real-time data, to the point where we're getting away from our instincts that we literally have inside us to pursue these critters. So I've learned to really kind of tap into those, and it's something that's evolved over time. They were very non-existent, when I started. And, slowly over time, through mistakes, through failures, recalculating, trying something, that didn't work. Like you said, I went too far. I should have stopped there and I didn't, or I didn't go far enough. And there he goes out of range. Your instincts are constantly like recalculating, over time. It's a long-term play. It's the long game. But when you learn to trust those, eventually they start to come through for you more, and those feelings you have, those gut feelings you have, those are pulled from old experiences that are telling you like, push in a little more, or pull back a little bit more, or you can do this. I feel like I need to go in there. I'm scared to go in there. I don't want to bump them, but I feel like I should. Those intuitions that you're getting those are your instincts trying to tell you to do something. And they're not always right, but the more you trust them, they automatically, subconsciously recalculate over time. And, like I said, they were non-existent when I started. I started to develop them once in a while. They were right. Most of the time they were wrong, in the next stage. And then the next stage, it's like I started kind of, trusting them a little more. And, sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. And now, whenever I get in a situation like that where I'm at a crossroads, I just follow that gut feeling, and a lot of times my whole hunt will just go off feelings and reacting to what's in front of me, or relying on those instincts to kick in to kind of guide me. And they're still wrong all the time, but they're right enough to put me in front of big animals consistently. And I love that. I love being that type of feel hunter that feels, these instincts kick in. I think I've heard a couple hunters talk about this. It's not talked about very much. One of them is Jared Scheffler. We talked on the phone. We geek out about this because him and we have that same mindset in a way. I'm kind of like in between, like sort of where you're at and where he's at, but I can very much tap into that, especially when I go out of state. Like sometimes I will go out of state and I will purposely go out there in the spring and I will scout this piece and this piece and this piece. And now I narrowed it down to these two pieces and I got these 3 or 4 spots on this property and I'm ready to go for the rut. Sometimes I don't even want to do that. I want to show up with no information, because then I'm able to tap into that. I'm able to tap into that instinct and go into that blind and try to come out with an animal, in a span of, a few days or a week or whatever it is. So I purposely give myself opportunities to build that and to work on that and to tap into that. But information is good too. Like that has led to a lot of animals, trail camera data. I glass him. I see what he's doing. I'm moving in. Like you're going out and you're gathering that intel, and then you're moving in right at the right moment. A lot of my deer come from that too. So I think it's easy to get really frozen or caught up with second guessing things. But I always tell hunters, like, err on the side of aggression. Aggressive decisions have paid off for me much more than laying back and being passive. Sometimes that's the move, you and I have shared a lot of stories where I've figured out, or I determined the move is to actually just plant myself here, be patient, and wait for that buck to come by. And I was able to do that successfully. So sometimes that is the move. But when you are aggressive, like when you're coming up, I always say take chances, because when you take chances, you're kind of forcing these situations a little bit, but then you're starting to figure out what works and what doesn't work. You're getting into the action, and yes, you blew it, but now next time, maybe you don't go in quite as far, or maybe you make a different move in that similar situation. So you're calculating those instincts through experience. Where if you're the guy that's so fearful, that's so scared to bump his buck, and he's always sitting way back, like a lot of times he's not even observing that, or he's not even getting those encounters. So having that more aggressive approach is more of a fast track, in my opinion, to become a better bow hunter. It doesn't mean be reckless, but it means go for it, man. Go for it. Get in there. Try to get as close as you can. Go for that. If you feel like it's right, do it. Don't always just sit back. Sometimes the play is sit back, observe. I love to do that. But I'm also aggressive when I think that's the move. And I've always been a pretty aggressive hunter, and I blew things a lot. I screwed up a lot by being aggressive. But like I said, now I've learned to tame that back when I need to tame it back. And I've learned to hit the gas when I need to hit the gas. And it's made me pretty efficient. So I rely on those instincts. I know it kind of sounds like hocus pocusy, but they're there. They are there. You just have to listen to them and trust them. And that's the thing. Trust them. They're going to be wrong more than they're going to be right when you're starting off. Over time, you're going to notice like, damn, I made the right move. Like you get these feelings and all of a sudden they start panning out for you. And then, next thing you know, it's 25, 30 years down the road. And like, you're able to operate on those a lot, especially like when you get thrown into, you on these out of state trips, you've never been there before. You're in a new country. It's like, that's what you're dealing with. I don't like using trail cameras out of state because I like to just go in and figure it out and use those instincts to get me on deer. And, it can really be an effective way to hunt. So I always try to encourage guys to tap into that and really kind of trust those feelings when you get them.
Yeah. And to tie it all together, that instinctual voice, as you said, it comes from experience, right? The more time you have out there doing these things, trying these things, the stronger those instincts become, the stronger that instinctual voice becomes. But the way to speed that up is to do the thing you said, which is to err towards aggressiveness. Like the only way to build that experience that builds your instincts is to be aggressive, put yourself in the mix enough to make mistakes, to learn the lessons, to see the thing, to be in the game. And that is like the way to speed up that learning process. Probably nothing has made a bigger difference for me in the last 5 years than is that very thing. Just beginning to push the envelope, get more aggressive, try the crazy thing, try the new thing, do the thing that, man, it's going to be a home run or it's going to be, striking out. But you're never going to know unless you try it. And like you said, plenty of times it doesn't work, but you learn something. And then 1 out of 10 times it does work and you hit the home run. But the 9 other times, you're learning a great lesson that maybe would not have been possible if you hung way out on the edge and never tried anything. So
exactly,
huge
yeah,
huge benefit to me.
So, I just like you, I have a ton of friends like that are real serious about hunting, and because I have that more aggressive approach, I have way more encounters each season than, all my friends. It's because I have more of that fearless mindset that I'm willing to go in and make the mistake. I'm willing to go in and potentially blow it up. And that's why I have more success, is because I'm putting myself in those situations more, and I'm willing to go in there more. Now, with that said, I make more mistakes than all of them too. I screw up more than all of them. Like we'll get on our texting thread. I have a couple different groups of guys that I talk to. Like I am screwing up more. I'm blowing more deer out, but I'm also having more encounters. I'm also in the game constantly. So it is, but like you said, the more you put yourself in there, you also get better in that situation. Like how do you get good on the ground, like sneaking into a buck's bedding area and, and staying undetected and maybe getting an arrow in them. Well, you don't get good at it by never doing it. You get good at it and have confidence in it by trying it and failing, trying it and failing, trying at it again and almost getting him, trying it again and getting him. It takes that mindset that I'm willing to burn a few bridges to gain a skill, to gain a confidence, to get more encounters down the road. And it comes with time, and I do have that confidence where if I screw one up, I know I could probably get on another one. And to be honest with you too, Mark, it's like I've killed a lot of deer. Like I've killed, I'm satisfied with my hunting career. I've killed a lot of deer, and yes, I want to kill more deer. I want to have more experiences, but like, if I had a season where I didn't kill anything, yeah, I would, I'd be probably hard on myself or whatever, but like I've had a long road of success and experiences. I'm very satisfied, and I want to continue that, and I want to continue to build. And if I screw up, and I screw up on a big deer, I don't care if even if I screw up on the biggest deer of my life, like I'm going to be fine. I've had a lot of experience. I've done well, and that's not everybody's situation yet. So I understand why some guys are a little more cautious, a little more fearful. But I think it does pay off just to kind of have that more go for it attitude. But realize it's not reckless. Aggressiveness and reckless are not the same thing. Don't be reckless. Still use your brain. Still use your smart. Be smart. Try to make good decisions, but maybe push the envelope a little more. Because when you're pushing the limits, then you learn what the limits are. And when you don't push the limits, you don't know what the limits are. You might have, someone listening to this, you might have way more skill potential than me or Jesse or Jared Scheffler or Mark or whoever. You might have that inside you, but you won't know that unless you push those limits. You have to test yourself. You have to try to do things that maybe haven't been done or maybe don't seem like they can be done. I've done things, pulled things off that I'm like, how did that happen? But the thing is, I just put myself there in that situation and, made some good decisions that felt like I should make them in that moment, and it pays off. So, I don't know. I guess that would be my advice.
Really, really good stuff. I want to end this with some rapid fire questions. So you get like a line or two to answer every one of these. 30 seconds or less. All right. So just like first thought, real quick answer, and we're gonna move through a bunch of these and then tie a bow on this thing. So first, this one's a hard pivot from some of the other things we've been talking about, but I think it poses an interesting counterpoint to a lot of what we talked about, because I think a lot of folks, especially newer folks, think that their deer hunting woes or their deer hunting dreams can be, found with like a silver bullet, right? If I just buy this thing, um, it'll make all the difference. Or if I just have the very best this, that, and the other thing, I'll be able to kill big deer like Andy. Um, and usually that's not the case. But gear is important. You talked about the fact that you obsess over your gear and tweaking things and making sure you've got the right setup and whatnot. So two gear related questions here. One, what purchase of $100 or less? So what very inexpensive purchase have you made that actually does make a big difference for you or has been very positively impactful? So what's one thing under $100 that actually is like, man, that little thing made a big difference?
For me personally, and this would probably help a lot of people out there, would be like a hinge release. You can get a used hinge release that will teach you, a good way to execute the shot that will help you maybe beat some bad habits if you have them. That's made, you could say a hinge release or maybe a resistance release. You used to use one. I think those, some of those can get pretty expensive. That's why I said a hinge release, because you can get one of those for under $100, especially like one that's a few years old. I got a couple over there I got for like $80. So yeah, that has made a big impact for me in just being able to execute a good shot, not rush the shot. And it has translated into much better hunting success for me in that moment of truth, getting away from that cheap index figure where I was punching the trigger. So that's the thing that comes to mind. I mean, under $100, it's hard. There's certain things that I think are really key, like binoculars and stuff, but that you'd be tough to get that under $100. So,
Well, okay. So then that leads us to the next question, which again, moving along here, if you had to give up all of your fancy high-end gear, like I know you've got a great bow, great binos, great clothing, the great saddle platform, like all that stuff. I know you've got a lot of things that you put a lot of value in and that you've invested in. if you had to give it all up and go back to beginner, like entry level Walmart, everything, Walmart clothes, Walmart binos, Walmart release, Walmart bow, everything, except for one category. You could keep your high end, top tier one thing. So you could keep your high end bow, you could keep your high end clothes, you could keep your high end optics, whatever. What's the one thing or the one category that you would choose in which you really did still want to keep that top tier big investment?
I certainly would not want to be hunting with a Walmart bow. That's for damn sure. Or Walmart arrows. I kind of gravitate towards the weapon because, that's the thing we're using to actually put the projectile through the animal. I could still kill deer off the ground. I could still kill deer with a cheap tree stand. I could still kill deer with cheap binoculars, a cheap release. But some of those cheaper bows and arrows, they're just really poor quality. I think then you kind of getting into more of like the way I think about it is more of like an ethical thing. I would want the weapon I have. I would want that to be. It doesn't need to be top of the line, but I wouldn't want Walmart level. I would want that to be probably my upgraded piece of equipment, just because that's the thing that's going to be actually attempting to kill the animal, and I would want that to be as good a quality as I could get it.
All right. Last three, real quick here. What's the most common trait, mindset, or habit that you see across all of the best deer hunters? So one most consistent thing across the best of the best deer hunters you know. What would you say that is?
Most of the successful hunters I see, it's a year long process. It's not like hunting season. The guys that are really getting it done, they have an almost year round thought process or focus that revolves a lot around hunting. They seem to be real detail oriented, whether it's gear or scouting or trail camera work or habitat work or covering new ground. Everyone that I know that's really good, they're doing something almost year round. Their archery, it's not just a pick up your bow right before the season. Okay, now I'm going to start thinking about deer. Oh, where am I going to hunt this year? It's as soon as the season ends, they're planning for the next one and that next buck, and that's I would say that.
Yeah. All right. What is one commonly held piece of hunting dogma? It's like a commonly held belief within the deer hunting world that most everyone thinks is true, that you believe is false.
Two come to mind. The one is I don't think you can 100% beat a deer's nose. I'm not going to say you can't. I just don't believe you can. I don't think that is a real thing that can be achieved through some sort of piece of equipment or a spray or a soap or anything like that. That's not to say playing the wind or getting higher. Those things obviously can help and can do that. And then I know you asked for one, but one other thing is like when you spook your buck, you think, that's your last chance or he's going to leave. I've come to find out that a lot of times they don't. They'll come right back or they'll be very close by. And I've proved that to myself a lot just in the last 5 years. Last year or 2 years ago, I shot one in the shoulder with my bow on November 7th from the ground. And then I ended up shooting him with my bow the last day of gun season, December 12th, not far from that same area. And then the buck this past year that I missed over the decoy and ended up getting a crack at him later, about a week later. So.
All right. Last question. If you were forced to distill your single most important piece of deer hunting advice, or like the most important concept or philosophy that defines how you kill deer. If you had to put that on a billboard on the side of the highway, like next to Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops or Shields, wherever, like where everyone's going to be driving by and seeing this message from Andy May, what would be that most important message be that you want to put there on the billboard for every deer hunter to see as they go drive into that store to get their gear, to buy their license, whatever it is?
Something along the lines of like, hunting is supposed to be fun. Like, don't compare yourself, you know, don't compare yourself to other guys, because not all of us are hunting on the same playing field, and it's easy to do these days. But something along those lines to remind the younger guys. I think about the younger guys a lot, the guys coming up that are seeing, you know, guys like me or, you know, Lee Ellis or Mark Drury, and like it's almost feels like you have to do something at that level to be a good hunter, and it's just simply not true. We're just all in different scenarios. So hunt your own hunt. Remember that it's supposed to be fun. If you want to try to be the best hunter you can be, learn from your mistakes, have that mindset of constantly improving. If you just want to go out and have fun and shoot deer with your family, go do that. Some of the happiest people I know in hunting are guys that do not care about big bucks. And they go with their dad and their brother up to hunting camp, and they shoot the crap out of little deer, and they are the happiest guys, I'll tell you. So that'd be a pretty big billboard to write all that, but you get the gist of it.
It's a really, really, really good message, though. So I will grant you the large billboard so that one can get out there for everyone. And I will thank you as always, Andy. A lot of wise words, a lot of great reminders, great insight, and we're all gonna be better because of it. So thank you, Andy.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, man. It was fun.
All right, that is a wrap. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed this series as much as I have. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.